Your inbox becomes a slot machine before your feet even hit the floor. You don't feel awake, you feel assigned. And the weirdest part is this: the job doesn't even have to be hard to feel soul-crushing. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's comfy, sometimes it pays well, sometimes you work from home in sweatpants and still, there's that hollow taste, like you've been chewing on plastic, like your life is being translated into a language that can't describe you. That emptiness isn't laziness. It isn't you being ungrateful. It isn't a mindset problem. It's a nervous system doing trauma accounting in a spreadsheet. Because a lot of white-collar work isn't just labor. It's a meaning environment, a climate, a scent, a constant low-grade pressure that asks you to become smaller without ever saying the word small. And corporate language is the perfume they spray in the room so you don't smell the truth. We're a family. Let's align. Synergy. Circle back. Lean in. Opportunity. Ownership mindset. It sounds like communication, but it behaves like anesthesia. Not the dramatic kind, the polite kind. The kind that keeps you awake, smiling, productive, and slightly numb. If your job feels meaningless, it's not because you're broken. It's because your brain is not designed to spend its one wild biological life obeying abstract symbols for abstract goals inside abstract rooms, under fluorescent light, being evaluated by people who are also trying not to scream. Your brain is built for cause and effect you can touch. You do a thing, something changes, you see it, you feel it, you belong somewhere in the chain. But in a lot of corporate work, your output evaporates into systems. You send an email that becomes a thread, that becomes a meeting, that becomes a deck, that becomes action items that become next week. You don't make things. You move meanings around. You rearrange intentions. You're a translator inside a language that doesn't want to say anything. So your body rebels in the only ways it's allowed to. You scroll, you procrastinate, you fantasize about quitting, and then you sit in a meeting where someone says, "We're like a family here," and a part of you wants to laugh, not because it's funny, because it's the only way to keep from feeling the insult land in your throat. Family doesn't give you performance reviews. Family doesn't restructure you out of existence with a cheerful email at 9:12 a.m. But family is a beautiful word because it hijacks something ancient in you: attachment, belonging, safety. It makes the company feel like a living thing that can love you back. And that's the trick. Corporate brainwashing rarely feels like a whip. It feels like a warm blanket you're not allowed to remove. The point isn't to convince you the work is meaningful. The point is to keep you from noticing it isn't. Because once you really notice the emptiness, you start asking dangerous questions. Why am I here? Why do I talk like this? Why do I feel guilty when I'm not maximizing myself? Why does my calendar own my nervous system? Corporate language isn't built to answer those questions. It's built to dissolve them. Watch how it works. When someone says we need to align, they're not describing reality. They're making a moral request. Alignment isn't just coordination. Alignment is obedience with a spiritual glow. When someone says, let's be agile, they're not talking about flexibility. They're talking about your tolerance for chaos. They're dressing instability in athletic clothing. When someone says, take ownership, it sounds empowering, but it often means carry the anxiety of outcomes you can't control and do it with a smile. When someone says, this is a great opportunity, 9 times out of 10 it means we're moving pain around the organization and it landed on you. And it's always said in a voice that's calm, friendly, reasonable, like the language itself is a sedative. Because direct language creates friction. Direct language makes power visible, and visibility is the enemy of control. If I say, we need you to work late because we underplanned and now we're scared, you might get angry. You might say no. You might see the system. That's how the narcotic works. It doesn't knock you out. It keeps you compliant by feeding you the sensation of meaning without the substance of meaning. There's a particular kind of meeting that feels like dying politely. A grid of faces, everybody pretending they're listening. Someone saying words that don't point to anything real. You can feel your mind trying to grab onto the topic like a wet hand on glass. And then someone says it, just to reiterate, and your soul leaves the room for a second, not dramatically, just quietly. But your body knows what your mouth has been trained not to say. You're trading your aliveness for social approval and a paycheck, and the exchange rate is getting worse. A lot of corporate life isn't about productivity. It's about identity management. They don't just want your time. They want your sense of self to fuse with the role because a fused employee doesn't revolt. A fused employee doesn't negotiate. A fused employee feels shame when they consider leaving. That's why the language is soaked in belonging words. Culture, family, values, mission, community, purpose. If it can get you to narrate your suffering as growth, it doesn't have to change anything. If it can get you to call your exhaustion passion, it can keep draining you with your consent. If it can get you to say we when you mean they, it has already won. And the crazy part is you participate in it, because you're not stupid, you're adapted. Your nervous system learned early. Belonging is safety. So when the company offers belonging, even counterfeit belonging, you lean in, because your biology doesn't care if the warmth is real. It cares that the room is warm. That's why corporate brainwashing is so effective. It doesn't target your intellect. It targets your attachment. It whispers, stay, don't rock the boat, be good, be valuable, be liked. And you start living like a product trying to maintain a 5-star rating. Your personality becomes a customer service voice. Your opinions get sanded down. Your ambition turns into compliance dressed as drive. You become a person who is easy to work with, which in corporate translates to easy to extract from. You can already picture the smile turning into that polite stiffness, the one that says, we don't do reality like that here. So you swallow it. You rephrase, you add padding. You turn your truth into a pillow so it won't bruise anybody's ego. And every time you do that, you teach your nervous system a lesson. Do that for a year and you won't recognize your own thoughts anymore. You'll recognize what thoughts are allowed. You'll start censoring yourself before you even finish the sentence in your head. That's not a character flaw. And if you're wondering why you feel empty at the end of the day, it's because you spent the day being a translated version of yourself. You can't feel full when you never show up whole. Your job becomes a spiritual vending machine. You put in hours. You get out tokens, money, status, titles, Slack reactions, maybe a great job in a public channel. But none of it nourishes you because it's not food. It's flavor. It's dopamine with a tie on. And your brain is smart enough to notice that you're surviving on flavor. So it starts craving more, not because you're greedy, but because you're underfed. You chase promotions, you chase recognition, you chase the next role, you chase impact. But the impact is always measured in numbers that can't hold your life. There's a quiet horror in how corporate language turns pain into performance. You're struggling, and instead of someone saying, this is too much, someone says, let's prioritize. As if your nervous system is a to-do list that needs better formatting. As if your exhaustion is a calendar issue. As if the problem isn't the cage, it's your time management inside the cage. So you download another app. You buy another planner. You watch another video about morning routines. You optimize yourself like you're trying to fix a leak by repainting the wall. And deep down you already know. The leak is structural. Your emptiness isn't random, it's signal. It's your organism refusing to lie forever. Because humans can do meaningless tasks. We can even do them for years. But we can't do them without paying a psychological tax. The tax is numbness. The tax is cynicism. The tax is that weird moment on a Sunday evening when your stomach gets heavy, not because anything bad happened, but because your body is anticipating the next round of pretending. A lot of corporate brainwashing works because it offers you a deal you secretly want. Not meaning, permission. Permission to not have to decide what your life is about. The company hands you a ready-made script. Here's your identity. Here's your ladder. Here's what success looks like. And if you follow it, you get rewards. Money, stability, social proof. You don't have to face the terrifying freedom of building your own meaning from scratch. So you trade freedom for structure. Until it starts feeling like a coffin with good benefits. Because meaning isn't something you can outsource. You can rent it for a while like a furnished apartment. But eventually you notice none of the furniture is yours. And you start itching. That itch becomes resentment. Resentment becomes burnout. Burnout becomes the blank stare you get when someone says, let's double-click on that. And you realize you've been double-clicking your life for years and nothing opens. There's a moment, usually alone, usually quiet, where the spell breaks. You catch yourself typing a sentence like, per our conversation I wanted to follow up, and you hear how dead it sounds, how bloodless, how carefully nothing. That's not you being dramatic. That's dissociation in a suit. It's your mind creating distance from something it can't fully tolerate. Because the truth is simple and unbearable. You are spending your finite attention maintaining a system that would replace you in a week if the spreadsheet demanded it. And they don't even have to be cruel for it to be true. That's just how systems behave. Corporate language is often designed to prevent rebellion by preventing clarity. Rebellion needs a target. Rebellion needs a sentence like, "This is unfair," or "This is pointless," or "This is not what I want." But if everything is wrapped in soft words, alignment, culture, growth, opportunity, then the problem becomes unlocatable. You can't punch a cloud, so you punch yourself instead. You internalize it as anxiety, as imposter syndrome, as I'm not motivated, as I need to fix my mindset, as maybe I'm just not built for this. Meanwhile, you are built for this. You're built for sensing when something is off. You're built for detecting when words are being used as fog. You're built for craving realness. The system calls that difficult. A healthier name is awake. And waking up doesn't mean you quit tomorrow and go live in the mountains. Most people can't. Most people shouldn't. Reality has rent. Waking up means you stop drinking the vocabulary like it's water. You start tasting it. You start noticing what each phrase is trying to make you feel. Because once you see the narcotic, it loses some power. You don't have to burn your life down to escape this. Start by reclaiming your internal language, not in a dramatic way, in a private way. When the meeting ends and you're alone, translate what was said into plain speech like you're decoding a cult pamphlet. Alignment becomes agreement or obedience. Opportunity becomes extra work. Agile becomes unstable, but you can't complain. Family becomes attachment pressure. High performer becomes reliable extraction point. You're not doing this to be bitter. You're doing it to restore reality. Because your brain can handle hard truths. What it can't handle is the slow poisoning of constant euphemism. Second, separate your worth from your role like your life depends on it. Because it does. A job title is a costume the world rents you. It's not your skin. But corporate culture wants it to become your skin, because then every critique feels personal, and you work harder to prove you deserve oxygen. You can practice a small, stubborn boundary. When you make a mistake, don't say "I am stupid" in your head. Say that action didn't work. When someone praises you, don't let it inflate your identity. Let it be feedback, not food. This looks like logging off and not mentally checking Slack for ghost vibrations. This looks like finishing a task and not immediately searching for the next one to justify your existence. This looks like refusing to treat busyness as a personality. Third, rebuild meaning outside the company's ecosystem. Because corporations are jealous gods. They want to be your everything. If all your dopamine comes from work, status, praise, challenge, then leaving feels like jumping off a cliff. So you create other anchors. Something physical that proves you can cause real change in the world. Cooking, lifting, gardening. Something relational that isn't networking. One honest friendship where you don't have to be impressive. Something quiet that isn't content. Walking without headphones, reading without harvesting it for insights. This isn't self-care fluff. This is sovereignty. Because when your life has other roots, corporate language can't hypnotize you as easily. It becomes what it really is. A dialect used to manage risk and control emotion, and you stop confusing it for truth. None of this makes you immune. You'll still feel the pull. You'll still catch yourself performing. You'll still sometimes say "circle back" like it's normal. But the difference is you'll know when you're doing it. You'll feel the moment your real self steps back and the corporate avatar steps forward. And instead of hating yourself for it, you'll recognize it as strategy. Sometimes you wear the mask because you need rent money, but you stop stapling the mask to your face. The soul-crushing part of corporate life isn't that it's demanding. Life is demanding. The soul-crushing part is that it asks you to betray your own perception in exchange for stability. It asks you to call boredom impact. It asks you to call obedience alignment. It asks you to call survival purpose. And then it wonders why people feel empty. You can survive a lot, but you can't thrive in a language that keeps deleting you. What's the most common sentence you type at work that you would never say out loud to someone you love?